Which country will soon operate the world's second largest satellite fleet? It's not the USA. They are number one with Starlink. It's not China. It is, and I had to read the news twice myself, Germany. The Bundeswehr is planning to build up to 1,200 satellites for reconnaissance and communication. And when this fleet is operational, that would make it number 2 in the sky after Starlink. Ahead of any country, ahead of any corporation, ahead of Amazon, and ahead of everything that China is actually flying so far. The centerpiece bears the wonderfully nerdy name Spock 2. It's about 5 billion euros. And that's why 3 German industrial camps are currently battling it out. A battle like this industry has never seen before. Airbus versus Rheinmetall versus OHB. Each with their own allies, from radar specialists in Finland to combat AI from Munich. Germany. So the country that treated its space program as a sideshow for decades is suddenly back in the game. The only question is whether this will be a real comeback or just another announcement. My name is Sirwan and this is Mars-Chroniken. Before we get to the battle, the question is why all of this is happening right now. The answer has a date, February 24th, 2022. The war in Ukraine has taught the world 2 lessons about satellites. The first, nothing works without them anymore. When cell towers and fiber optics were destroyed in Ukraine, a single system kept the country's communications alive: Starlink. The second lesson is more uncomfortable. This lifeline belongs to a single man. And the debates about where and when this network is available and where it isn't have set off alarm bells in every defense ministry in Europe. Anyone who, in an emergency, depends on the mood of a foreign company boss has no sovereignty, just a subscription. On top of that, there's the modern warfare system, which simply doesn't work anymore without situational awareness from orbit. Radar reconnaissance, optical reconnaissance, missile warning, everything depends on the sky. And so, space suddenly appears at the very top of German procurement lists, embedded in an arms package of historic proportions. So, what exactly is UNOC-2? The abbreviation stands for Space System for Persistent Operational Tracking. So, a space system for continuous operational surveillance. Behind it is a constellation of around 1,000 satellites equipped with radar and special cameras, which is intended to provide the military with the most comprehensive and precise situational awareness possible. Continuous is the key word here. A single reconnaissance satellite flies over a target area every few hours. A constellation of hundreds is practically always watching. The estimated contract value is around 5 billion euros. The system is expected to be operational in no less than 3 years. And Spock 2 is only half of it. At the same time, SATCOM BW4 is being developed as the 4th generation of Bundeswehr satellite communications. Several hundred more satellites for secure communications links. Together, this results in a fleet of up to 1,200 satellites, which would make Germany the number 2 in the world behind Starlink. Assuming that by then Blue Origin, China and a few other players have been asleep. Let's let that sink in for a moment. The Bundeswehr, which has made embarrassing headlines for years with radios and rifles, is now planning one of the largest space fleets in human history. And now, onto the real battle. Because 3 camps are fighting for Spock 2. And the lineup is fascinating. In the first camp stands Airbus Defence and Space, the established giant which has allied itself with the measurement technology specialist Rohde und Schwarz. In the second camp stands Rheinmetall, the tank and munitions corporation, which until now was a nobody in the space industry, but has teamed up with the Finnish radar satellite world market leader ICI. And near Düsseldorf, they are already building a factory that is supposed to churn out at least 1 satellite per week. And in the third camp stands OHB from Bremen, the German medium-sized space company, which has bolstered its position with the Munich defense AI company Helsing and the Norwegian arms group Kongsberg. And which is planning a factory in Saxony or Bremen for up to 3 satellites per week. All 3 camps have also brought German new space startups like Constellation and Live.io on board. And that's exactly the real cultural shift. For decades, such contracts were negotiated among the usual suspects. Now, consortia with startups are creating real competition. The contracts are expected to be signed in about 2 years. The first satellites will launch in about 3 years. And one detail makes the whole thing even better known. In the SATCOM BW4 communications constellation, the same 3 corporations are not competing against each other, but working together. Airbus even plans to set up a production line for satellites of the OneWeb design in Friedrichshafen. Competitors in reconnaissance, partners in communication. German spaceflight is basically playing chess with itself right now. A representative of the Bundeswehr has pointed out the weak spot himself. No one in Germany has ever managed this kind of mass production before. Up until now, satellites here have been built like Mars suits, one at a time, expensively over years. Now they're supposed to be made on assembly lines. 3 units per week, and that's exactly the discipline in which SpaceX has left everyone else behind. At least the demand for supplies is also benefiting the German rocket startups, especially ESA Aerospace and Rocket Factory Augsburg. After all, 1,000 satellites need to get up there first. If you know our e-videos, you can guess how closely this race is tied to the launcher race. A quick note about our own stuff, and I'll keep it brief. If these explanations are helpful to you, please give the video a like. It's just a single click, but it makes sure YouTube shows the video to a lot more people. And especially with a topic about Germany, every bit of reach counts. If you want to support Mars Chroniken even further, you'll find some nice extras in the channel memberships, and you'll be directly funding this research. And for everyone who want to wear the Peraspera Ad Astra spirit in everyday life, our Planet Pioneers shop has the embroidered Ad Astra collection ready for you. Link in the description. Thank you. And now to the uncomfortable question. What does the rest of Europe actually say about this? Because this is where things get geopolitically tricky. The EU is already working on its own answer to Starlink, the IRIS² constellation. Around 290 satellites, 10.6 billion euros. Operated by the SpaceRISE consortium, made up of Eutelsat, SES and Hispasat, with an initial basic coverage now promised for 2029. And what is Germany doing? It is building its own national architecture in parallel. That's why alarm bells are ringing in Brussels. The chairwoman of the Defense Committee in the EU Parliament, Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, warns, if Germany now builds a purely national architecture, which is not integrated into IRIS², there is a risk of weakening European structures. And in the EU Parliament, there is concern about duplicate structures, fragmentation and additional costs. Berlin counters. IRIS² is a possible addition, but their own systems are tailored to the specific needs of the Bundeswehr. Both have a point. A country that doesn't want to wait for Brussels to reach a consensus in an emergency needs its own capabilities. But a continent that affords itself the luxury of competing against Starlink with half a dozen rival miniature constellations hasn't understood the problem of fragmentation that has plagued Europe's space industry for decades. And the others? France is taking its classic approach through industrial policy. The French state is now the largest shareholder in the satellite operator Eutelsat, which also includes the British-rooted OneWeb constellation. And Airbus is already building the next generation of OneWeb satellites, whose delivery is scheduled to begin at the end of 2026, explicitly as a precursor to IRIS². So Paris is securing the European solution for itself. Which brings us to the little irony that Europe's only somewhat functional mega constellation is actually OneWeb, which comes from Great Britain and has roughly 650 satellites. So, from the country that left EU. If you don't count the British, Europe has simply been a spectator when it comes to constellations so far. Italy, on the other hand, is trying to be everywhere at once. Rome has publicly flirted with a Starlink deal for its own government communications, considers IRIS² internally to be too slow, and sees Starlink as superior. And at the same time, under the name Mercurio, is working on a feasibility study for its own national constellation, which has already entered phase 2. You could call that flexibility. Or you could call it doing their own thing. And then there is a country that no one would expect in this list. And as a Viennese, it makes me especially happy. Austria. Neutral Austria is building military satellites. No joke. The Austrian armed forces are running 2 projects under their space strategy, which together include 5 satellites. Leo 2, Leo 2, VLEO. A partnership with the Netherlands is sending 3 satellites into orbits between about 500 and 200 kilometers in altitude. A 4th unit served as a test object. So low that the cameras deliver significantly sharper images than usual. Total costs are around 10 million euros. 6 million of that comes from Vienna. And BeaconSat, a purely Austrian project for under 1 million euros. A tiny, hard-to-attack satellite that is supposed to detect and analyze interference signals starting in early 2027. By the way, built in Schwechat. The demo version was presented in March. Defense Minister Tenner called it data sovereignty. The long-term goal is to have their own small constellations for communication, navigation and reconnaissance. 5 satellites are obviously cute compared to 1,200. But the direction is remarkable. Even neutral, Austria has understood that neutrality without its own eyes in orbit only means being allowed to watch on someone else's screens. By the way, the best punchline came from the military itself. According to a responsible official, they tried all sorts of things to avoid having the state rely on SpaceX. It didn't help. Even Austria's military satellites are launched with Falcon 9. If you want to know why Europe doesn't have or doesn't yet have its own reliable access, here our ESA Aerospace videos are linked above. Finally, my honest assessment. Yes, Germany is back. And more seriously than ever before in this century. 5 billion just for Spock 2. Real competition instead of backroom deals. Startups at the table. Factories under construction. This is not just talk. This is industrial policy with a clear message. And the combination of Rheinmetall's defense funding, ECI's radar experience, Helsing's AI and OHB's space engineering show that a new industrial ecosystem is coming together here. But, and this is a big but, so far, this second largest satellite fleet in the world exists only on paper. The contracts will be signed in 2 years at the earliest. The first satellites will arrive in 3 years. And until the full constellation is in place, Starlink will already have the next generation in orbit and China will have built its own networks. No one in Germany has yet demonstrated the mass production capability this all requires. At least not in the field of satellites. And perhaps the most embarrassing gap is still getting to orbit. As long as even Austria's military relies on Falcon 9 for lack of any alternative, Europe's sovereignty in space is a sovereignty with an American elevator. Germany has made the right diagnosis and finally put money on the table. Now it has to do something that's harder than both of those things combined. Deliver in quantities, on time, for years. Whether this comeback becomes a real constellation or just the most expensive declaration of intent in German spaceflight history won't be decided in press releases, but on assembly lines in Neuss, Bremen and Friedrichshafen. We're watching closely. Honest as always, across the board. My name is Sirwan and that was Mars Chroniken. Thank you for tuning in. Per Aspera ad Astra.